see the overall area. We can't just say, hey, we're gonna overall do it. I mean, because there's really some growing pains in some of the areas of the roads of, do we have the lanes, do we have the capacity to do it safely? And I think we should strive for it, but we should use common sense when doing this to make sure that we don't affect the traffic flow in a negative manner just by policy, outright.
Is that your answer, you guys? We'll save us some time. All right, I think I have one more question and I can let you guys mingle. I'm going to keep these relatively short, and it's a fairly, hopefully not too detailed question. The OptiCo's consultant team for Code Next noted 10 key findings in its diagnosis of Austin's current land development code. Included in these top 10 issues for consideration were ineffective base zoning districts, competing layers of regulations, complicated opt-in, opt-out system, lack of household affordability and choice, a code that is too centered around cars, and the current code isn't always in line with Imagine Austin. If you want to talk about the ones I didn't talk about, that's A-okay, go for it. I left the boring ones out. What I'd like to know for you in about a minute is, what do you think is the most important issue that they got right, and what do you think they got wrong out of those 10 key issues that they're facing? So it looks like we are on to Ms. Zone, you're first.
This will be my favorite topic. I can't believe you're going to shorten it. Okay, so really the biggest problem that we have, that I agree with the consultant, not everything I agree with them, for the record, but what I do agree with is that we have offered too many opt-ins and opt-outs. And what that means is it makes it very difficult when you go in and you have to regulate, because when you go in for variances and conditional uses and then you want overlays, I'm going to tell you from being on the front line and having to review these, it's not easy. And that is probably, even if we kept the base zoning as is, we would be able to fix our problems if we could get rid of that. Variances, first of all, were set into for like, if there was a hardship. So we're not even using variances appropriately. This is the first place where I've ever seen like careless use of a good regulation. So that's probably the only thing, not the only, but the one thing I'm in line with them.
Okay. Mr. Boyd?
Similarly, it's the ineffective base zoning. This is basically the flip side of the opt-in, opt-out problem. We've got so many conditional overlays, different ordinances and items coming in, that the code is incredibly complex, very difficult to use. And that's why I think we see so many these intense fights down in City Hall over zoning decisions, because everything is almost on a case-by-case basis. And we have no really agreed-based rules to provide for a lot of the development. So that, I think, is the big, the thing, one of the most important things they said. I'm trying to remember that anything in the 10 I really didn't agree with. If there's anything I disagree with, it's probably something they didn't go far enough on.
Mr. English?
Well, the diagnosis that they came up with, I think any average citizen living here could almost come up with that same list. So I'm not sure that we have any real lightning bolt striking here. I do think that the land use code certainly needs to be revisited. I think there's almost universal acceptance of that. The question is, how far do you take it? You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. One of the things that I think is absolutely critical as a part of the process is the permitting process here. It's absolutely broken. I think from a simple home remodel up to someone trying to start a business with a constructor will tell you that the zoning process here is an absolute disaster. I mean, the permitting process here is an absolute disaster. And a lot of the issues that we have with affordable housing revolve around the inability of builders to cost effectively and quickly get permits. We have a serious permitting issue.
Out of those 10, is there one particular that you think they should really go with and run with more so than the others?
It's a preliminary diagnosis, and there will be a vote scheduled to be a vote by the council on how to proceed forward, give them that, while the current council is seated. But the real details, the devil's always in the details, and the real details on how we address those issues and what comes out of what they've accomplished so far, that'll actually occur after the first of next year, and the next council will vote on that. And I would reserve judgment on which one needs to be focused on versus that over another, based on what the actual specifications are and what recommendations they come forward with. Because right now, there's just not enough information to say this is a higher priority than something else.
Mr. Salazar?
I'd agree. I think they all touched it on. It's just basically talking in one big mass is the zoning areas. I mean, it's so complex that when people talk to variances things, you have whole teams of professional corporations that have lawyers upon lawyers, and if you're just your average Joe, average citizen, who's going to give you that knowledge? Who's going to give you that base? So we need to simplify it, or at least give people an ombudsman, somebody that can educate them in these capacities, because without it, we'll be lost. And now we voters.
Ms. Poole?
I'd say that they're all pretty important. I think they all interrelate, and I should start out with your base zoning, so you need to shake that out, but I don't see leaving any of those on the table. And they all need to be streamlined for sure. And I would just say that the way you described it in your question, be like, why would people not want Code Next to proceed if they were going to dig into all of those issues? And I think the answer possibly to that question is something what Ed said, which is we don't know which way they'll go. So as long as the process stays open and transparent, it has a good chance.
Does anyone agree that if we don't know enough about what's in it, then we shouldn't dig our heels in so early in the process?
That's what I
When you say dig in, you're referring to people who think
I'm
the
referring to
process-
no one by name.
How about a generic group?
I'm just floating it out there.
There are some people that are concerned about the process, and from very early on, at least in some of the meetings that I've gone to at Code Next, that I'm trying to get involved with, are much more, starting from a position of, so all I'm saying is, you may not be a yes, you may say it's too early to get the yes, but I'm thinking too, if it's too early to yes, it's too early to get the no. That's all, that's where I was asking.
I'd agree with that. I think there's a justifiable level of skepticism. I think a lot of people that have lived here for some length of time have seen promises made that weren't kept. And if you've been down that road more than once, you get a little nervous about things as dramatic, potentially offering as significant a change in our land use as Code Next. A lot of people are quite skeptical. There are a few that immediately adopt the no before they get out of the starting gate. I think that's probably a mistake. But I think a little healthy skepticism is warranted. It keeps the process running down the middle of the road when you have two different points of view.
Well, what we've been talking about is there are people who are pushing the vote that's coming through the council this fall on the outline for the Code Next. And they want that vote delayed for the new council, to consider next year. I don't think we need to delay that. We need to keep the process going forward as it stands. The draft code will then come before the new council, and we'll have time for lots of public, opportunity. We'll have public review on the outline. We'll have public review and discussion on the outline, and then the final revised code is going to come back. It may even be before the next council, because it may be that it comes in after the 2016 elections, so that you vote. So this fall's vote is the first of the three major milestones here, and I don't see any reason to delay it for the sake of delay.
Final question, everybody have a little bit of fun. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Corey.